Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today, and I think you'll like this one. We're going to be looking at the English for Freelancers podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and this podcast is all about helping people gain the confidence to really use English well to make their freelancing careers even better.
And I think that's a great idea. English is so crucial these days for anyone who's freelancing, especially if you want to work with international clients.
For sure, like if you're on Upwork or Fiverr, for example, English is basically a must-have.
You got it. And what I really like about this English for Freelancers podcast is that it's super practical.
Totally. It's not just about, learning dry grammar rules or anything like that. They actually give you advice on things like how to write a really good proposal or how to deal with a difficult client, all while using good English.
Yeah, they really focus on the real world stuff. And one of the things they emphasize is the importance of knowing key freelancing terms, kind of like building up your professional vocabulary.
Oh, for sure. So, I get that having a portfolio is important, but I've always wondered, what makes a portfolio really stand out? What should I be putting in there?
That's such a good question. And actually, this podcast talks about that. They say it's all about showcasing your best work, making sure it's easy to navigate, and tailoring it to the specific clients you're trying to attract.
Oh, so it's not just about showing what you've done. It's about presenting it in a way that actually connects with potential clients.
Exactly. And they also explain other important terms like invoice, and they're careful to point out the difference between an invoice and a receipt.
Oh, yeah, I've totally mixed those up before.
Yeah.
It's easy to think everyone uses those words the same way, but this podcast really highlights those little differences that can be super important.
Right. And it's not only about individual words either. This podcast also gives you useful phrases that you can use at every stage of your freelancing journey.
Oh, that's cool. What kind of phrases are we talking about?
So let's say you're at a networking event and you run into a potential client. This podcast gives you phrases like, I specialize in your skill and I'd love to hear about your current projects. That can be a great way to break the ice.
Okay, that makes sense. I always get a little awkward in those situations, so it's good to have a few phrases in my back pocket.
I know what you mean. And it's not just about starting conversations either. They also have phrases for negotiating your rates.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I hate talking about money sometimes. What do they suggest saying?
Well, they recommend phrases like, my standard rate for this type of project is amount, but I'm happy to discuss a package that works with your budget.
Right, so you're being clear about your value, but also showing that you're flexible.
Yeah, they explain the thinking behind the phrases, which I think helps you use them more effectively.
That's super helpful. It takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. And they also offer phrases for things like managing projects, like setting clear deadlines and expectations. Something like, to make sure we stay on schedule, let's aim to have the first draft finished by date.
It sounds so basic, but being clear about those things can really prevent a lot of problems later on, right?
Absolutely. And the best part is, they don't just give you the phrase, they explain why it works, which makes it easier to remember and adapt it to different situations.
Wow, that's like having a communication coach right there with you, walking you through everything.
It really is. But freelancing isn't always easy, rightly? There are tough situations like when a client doesn't pay on time or when the scope of a project keeps growing and growing.
Ugh, I hate when that happens.
Me too. But don't worry, because this podcast has got you covered. They give you the words and phrases you need to deal with those kinds of challenges in a professional way without getting too stressed out.
Okay, so if a client is late paying, what do they suggest?
Yeah. They recommend saying something like, I haven't received the payment for invoice number yet. Could you please check on that?
Okay, that sounds a lot more professional than what I would have said.
Yeah.
It gets the point across, but in a nice way.
Exactly. They really emphasize the importance of staying calm and professional, even when things are a bit frustrating.
And what about scope creep? How do they recommend handling that?
They suggest saying something like, I'm happy to make those changes, but they're outside the original scope of the project. Maybe we could chat about how to adjust the timeline and budget to accommodate them.
That makes sense. It's about being willing to work with the client, but also setting boundaries.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right balance.
This is all so incredibly useful. It's like they've thought of every possible situation a freelancer might face and given you the language tools to handle it.
It really is impressive. And remember, it's not just about speaking English correctly. It's about communicating clearly and professionally, which makes a huge difference when you're trying to land clients and build a successful freelance career.
So true. And speaking of confidence, I've always wondered, if English isn't my native language, how can I improve my fluency and sound more natural when I'm talking to clients. Does the podcast have any tips for that?
They do. They talk about a few different strategies, like focusing on mastering the most important terms first, practicing writing professional emails in English, and even joining online communities for freelancers where you can connect with other people and practice your English in a supportive environment.
Those online communities sound like a really good idea. Not only could I practice my English, but I could also network with other freelancers.
Definitely. And they emphasize that learning a language takes time, so surrounding yourself with other freelancers can give you a lot of support and motivation.
It's like having your own personal cheerleading squad for your freelance journey. That's awesome. But even with practice and support, I'm sure there are still some common mistakes that non-native English speakers might make. Does the podcast talk about that?
They do. They point out some things to watch out for, like mixing up invoice and receipt, or using too much technical jargon that the client might not understand.
Ah, right. We talked about the invoice and receipt thing earlier. But what about the jargon? It's tempting to use fancy words to sound more professional, but I guess that could backfire if the client doesn't have a clue what you're talking about.
Exactly. They suggest avoiding terms like scope creep without explaining what they mean. It's better to just use simple language that everyone can understand.
Okay, that's a good reminder to prioritize clarity.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely been guilty of using jargon without realizing that not everyone knows what it means.
It's an easy mistake to make, especially when you're surrounded by other freelancers who use that language all the time.
So it sounds like this podcast is all about providing context and being clear in your communication, which makes total sense when you're working with clients from all different backgrounds.
Absolutely. And they also say it's perfectly fine to ask for clarification if you're not sure about something.
I love that. It takes the pressure off of having to be perfect, and it encourages more open communication, right?
For sure. It's about building a good relationship with your clients where everyone feels comfortable asking questions.
This is all so insightful. It's like they've distilled the essence of what it means to communicate effectively in the freelance world.
I agree. And they've presented it in a way that's both practical and easy to understand.
I'm really glad we decided to take a closer look at this English for Freelancers podcast. It's given me a whole new perspective on how English can be more than just a language. It can be a tool for success in the global freelance world.
For sure. It's really inspiring to see how they've combined language learning with actionable advice for freelancers.
And you know what? It's got me thinking about my own freelance goals.
Woo! What are you thinking about? Well, I'm all ears. What's going through your mind?
I think hearing about how important English is to reach a wider audience, it makes me think about my own niche. I've kind of always stuck with local clients, but maybe it's time to, branch out a bit.
I think that's a great idea. This podcast really shows how being fluent in English can open so many doors. It's like taking your freelance business from your local area to the entire world.
I know, right? It's exciting, but also a little scary, to be honest. I mean, what if I run into problems because of cultural differences? Like, what if I accidentally say something offensive or misunderstand what a client means?
I get it. Those are valid concerns. But the good news is that the podcast talks about this too. They stress how important it is to be aware of cultural differences, and they even give some tips on how to handle those kinds of situations.
Oh, that's good to know. So, what are some of their tips?
One thing they talk about is being aware of different communication styles. Some cultures are very direct, while others are more indirect. If you understand that, you can adjust the way you communicate to avoid any misunderstandings.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I tend to be pretty straightforward when I talk, but I can see how that might not be the best approach with everyone.
Right. It's all about being sensitive to who you're talking to and where they're coming from.
Okay, I see. Did any other cultural tips stand out to you?
They also talk about being aware of time zones and working hours. If you're working with people across different time zones, it's really important to be respectful of that when you're scheduling meetings or setting deadlines.
Oh, totally. It's easy to forget that what's the middle of the day for me could be like 2 in the morning for someone else.
Exactly. Even something as simple as sending an email at a decent hour can make a big difference. It shows that you respect their time.
It's all about those little things,
Yeah.
right? They can really help to build strong relationships with your clients.
For sure. And speaking of relationships, they also talk about doing your research on cultural norms and etiquette.
Yeah, I once made a big mistake with a client because I used a slang term that had a totally different meaning in their culture.
Oh, no. It's amazing how those small language nuances can really trip you up, huh? Taking the time to learn about different cultures can help you to avoid those awkward situations and show that you respect your clients.
You're right. It's not just about getting the work done. It's also about making an effort to understand where the other person's coming from.
And actually, this focus on cultural awareness isn't only about avoiding mistakes or awkwardness.
No, it's more than that.
Yeah, it's also about building genuine connections and relationships based on mutual respect and understanding.
That's so important because when you have those kinds of strong relationships built on trust and clear communication, your freelance business can really flourish.
Definitely. But I know it takes time and effort to build those relationships. Sometimes I just want to focus on getting the work done.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. There are days when all that relationship building stuff feels like a lot of extra work.
But this podcast reminds us that those relationships are just as important as our technical skills, if not more so.
It's like they're saying, yeah, you need to be good at what you do, but you also need to be good with people.
Right. It's that combination of hard skills and people skills that really makes freelancers successful.
Listening to all this is making me realize that freelancing is about so much more than just completing projects. It's also about building a whole business, a brand, and a network of people who can support you.
I love that. And that's where being fluent in English is so powerful. It allows you to connect with a global network of clients, collaborators, and mentors who can help you to grow.
This podcast is almost like a mentor in itself. They've packed so much experience and practical advice into these little bite-sized lessons.
I totally agree. And something that really stuck with me is how they emphasize embracing the imperfections that come with learning a new language.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to get discouraged when you make mistakes or feel like you're not progressing fast enough.
But they remind us that making mistakes is actually part of the learning process. It's how we grow and get better.
That's so true. It takes the pressure off of trying to sound perfect all the time. You can just relax and enjoy the learning process.
And they even give some tips on how to handle those oops moments with grace. Like if you mispronounce a word, you could just say something like, "Excuse me, let me rephrase that."
Haha, I do that all the time, even in my own language. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing the mistake and moving on without making a big deal out of it.
You got it. You can stay professional while still acknowledging that we all make mistakes. It's human.
And they also say it's okay to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. In fact, it shows that you're paying attention.
Absolutely. It's much better to ask a question than to pretend you understand and then mess something up because of it.
So really, having confidence in your English isn't about speaking perfectly. It's about being comfortable with making mistakes and knowing that you can always learn and improve.
And it's about having the tools and strategies to navigate those tricky situations without losing your cool.
It's like this podcast is giving us a whole toolbox for success in the freelance world.
It really is. And they also highlight the fact that learning English is a continuous journey.
It's not like you reach a certain level and then you're done.
Exactly. It's about constantly learning new things, expanding your vocabulary, and refining the way you communicate.
And the great thing is that there are so many resources available to help us along the way, starting with this amazing podcast.
Totally. They also encourage people to join online communities for freelancers. In those communities, you can connect with others, share tips, and practice your English in a relaxed and supportive environment.
Yeah, we talked about those communities earlier, but it's definitely worth mentioning again how helpful they can be for both language practice and networking.
For sure. And the cool thing is that you can find communities for almost any interest you can think of, whether it's writing, web development, graphic design, anything.
So no matter what kind of freelancer you are, you can find people who share your interests and practice your English in a way that's relevant to your work.
Exactly. And as you become more comfortable with English, you'll find that it opens up so many opportunities, not just for your career, but also for your personal life.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener for me. I'm realizing now that I've been holding myself back by not taking advantage of the power of English.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's amazing how just exploring a resource like this podcast can really shift your perspective.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think this is a good point to pause and let everyone process everything we've talked about. It's been a lot of information, from learning key freelancing terms to understanding different cultures.
It really has. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Oh, I love a good cliffhanger. What's the question?
I want them to consider this. How could learning English not only help their freelance careers, but also enrich their lives in other unexpected ways?
Ooh, that's a good one. It encourages them to look beyond just the practical benefits and think about the personal growth that comes with mastering a new language.
Exactly. It's about opening yourself up to new cultures, new perspectives, and new possibilities that you might never have imagined.
I can't wait to explore that more in the last part of our deep dive. Welcome back, everyone. It's great to be diving back into this English for Freelancers podcast with you. It's amazing how much we've uncovered so far.
I know, right? We've really gotten a good look at how important English is for freelancers who want to make it in the global market.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep thinking about that question you left us with last time about how English can enrich our lives in ways that go beyond our careers.
Oh, I'm glad that stuck with you. Yeah, the podcast talks about that too. They emphasize that learning English isn't just about getting more clients or earning more money. It's about broadening your horizons and connecting with the world in a deeper way.
That's such a cool way to think about it. Like, English becomes a bridge to other cultures, experiences, and points of view.
Exactly. Imagine being able to travel to another country and actually have real conversations with the locals, not just rely on phrase books or gestures.
Oh man, that would be amazing. I'd love to travel more, but I've always felt a bit limited because of language barriers.
I know what you mean. But when you're fluent in English, those barriers start to disappear. You can connect with people from all over the world, sharing stories, ideas, and experiences.
It's like taking your travels to a whole new level. You're not just seeing the sights, you're actually engaging with the culture.
And it's not just about travel either. Being fluent in English also gives you access to so much knowledge and entertainment. There are countless books, movies, music, and online resources that are primarily in English.
Oh, totally. I've definitely missed out on some great stuff because of language barriers. It's exciting to think about all the things I could experience with better English skills.
And it's not just about taking in content, it's about creating it too. Think about being able to share your own unique stories and ideas with a global audience.
Wow, that's powerful. It's like English gives you a bigger platform, a chance to connect with people who share your passions, no matter where they are in the world.
You got it. And those connections can turn into collaborations, friendships, and even a sense of belonging that goes beyond borders.
This makes me realize that learning English isn't just about developing a skill, it's about investing in your own personal growth and your ability to interact with the world in a more meaningful way.
I like that. And the best part is, this journey of learning and growth never really ends. There's always more to learn, new skills to develop, new connections to make.
It's like English becomes your passport to a lifetime of adventures. But before we get too carried away with all the exciting possibilities, I want to bring it back to the practical side of things. The podcast gives some really good advice on how to fit English learning into our busy freelance schedules.
They do. They stress that even small steps can make a big difference over time. It's about finding ways to include English in your daily routine, even if it's just for a few minutes here and there.
So, like, what are some examples? What could people actually do?
They suggest things like listening to English podcasts while you're commuting, reading articles in English about your field, or watching movies in English with subtitles.
All right, those are all really easy to fit into your day. It's about making English a natural part of your life, not just something you have to force yourself to do.
I agree. And they also recommend finding someone to practice speaking with, like a language partner, or joining an online community where you can practice English with other people in a relaxed setting.
We've talked about the benefits of those online communities a few times already, but it's worth repeating how valuable they can be, both for language practice and for networking.
For sure. And there are communities out there for almost every interest you can imagine. Whether you're into writing, web development, graphic design, whatever, there's a community for you.
So no matter what kind of freelancing you do, you can find people who get you and practice your English in a way that's relevant to your work.
Exactly. And as you get more confident with English, you'll see how it opens up so many doors for you, both in your career and in your personal life. You'll be able to interact with the world in a richer, more fulfilling way.
I love that. This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening for me. I'm realizing now that I could be doing so much more with my English skills.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's been awesome exploring these ideas with you.
Me too. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to see the power of English and all the amazing things you can achieve as a freelancer in the global marketplace.
Absolutely. Remember that learning English is an ongoing journey, one that's full of opportunities for growth, discovery, and connection.
So keep practicing, keep learning, and don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
And who knows, maybe someday you'll be sharing your own freelance success story with the whole world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the English for Freelancers podcast. Until next time, keep those conversations flowing.
See you next time.